As a former FBI agent and chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, I had oversight of all 16 of our nation's intelligence agencies. My name is Mike Rogers. I had access to classified information gathered by our operatives, people who risked everything for the United States and our families. You don't know their faces or their names. You don't know the real stories from the people who lived the fear and the pressure. Until now.
There was a Cuban agent with access to classified information, placing our entire nation's future at risk.
The spy was almost certainly in our building.
I think it's the betrayal that gets me. Like, how dare you?
It's a sensitive time because we were launching a war.
Our boys and girls in uniform are gonna die because she stabbed him in the back.
Almost every nation in the world spies. Most nations in the world spy against the United States. We are the #1 target. There are at least 70, give or take 10, nations spying on the U.S. If you were to believe there are probably in excess of 100,000 foreign agents working in this country, that's not paranoia. That's a good guess. My name's Chris Simmons. I was a career intelligence officer with the Defense Intelligence Agency, where I headed counterintelligence analysis for the Americas team. The Defense Intelligence Agency is the Pentagon's intelligence apparatus. DIA is focused on the national security structure of every nation in the world. The way we became engaged with this case, a woman who led part of the FBI investigation took the initiative to set up the meeting. The FBI explained that we've heard you and your team are the best there are on Cuban intelligence, and we are part of an FBI spy case that involved Cuba, which had been dragging on for 3 years, and we're frustrated. Can you help us? I was so concerned about the damage that this mole could have already inflicted and would continue to inflict that I immediately called Scott Carmichael. Scott Carmichael was head of our investigation side.
I love being a spy hunter. I love the chase. Nothing would make me happier than for somebody to say, well, Scott, we know espionage is occurring. We've got these few tidbits of information. Can you help us out? You bet. I especially loved what are termed unsub investigations, unknown subject investigations. And those are investigations where you have good reason to believe that espionage is occurring. You have absolutely no idea who might be doing it. FBI was trying to identify a Cuban spy who was possibly in the D.C. area, and they knew a few tidbits of information about the spy, but they had no idea who this person was, where this person worked. Well, that's a problem, because what they were talking about is the possibility that there was a Cuban agent with access to classified information. Cuba does not pose a credible military threat to the United States. The real danger of Cuban intelligence operations is that the intelligence take is shared by Cuba with other countries. He shares information with Iran, China, Russia, even Venezuela, North Korea.
What makes Cuba important is that it's the world's biggest intelligence trafficker. And I say that in the context of the sale or barter of U.S. secrets is now one of the central engines of the Cuban economy. Whether it's political secrets, economic secrets, military secrets, every country has interest in the United States. And Cuba, their ability to steal secrets They outperform almost every nation in the world. The Cubans are so good for several reasons. At the start of the Cold War, the Russians and all the Warsaw Pact allies saw the Cubans as useful partners that would not draw attention like they would. The Russians, the Poles, every service in the world trained the Cubans. Cuba exploited the perception that they're not a threat because it lowers their cost of espionage, and it gets them more clients because situations that would be hard for the Chinese or Russians to do, Cuban agents can do easily. Building an unsub case is like putting a puzzle together. The challenge is you don't know what the puzzle looks like, and you don't know how many pieces there are. The FBI's case, they had 3 very distinct pieces of the puzzle. As they shared their puzzle pieces, turns out I had the 4th puzzle piece. That one piece of information fit perfectly into what they had just shared, and when we put it all together, I told them that the FBI is looking in the wrong place, because the unsub doing the 3 things you just shared, coupled with the 4th piece of the puzzle, there are probably 40 or 50 people that could do what your unsub can do, and in all likelihood is working within the confines of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Even more narrowly, spy was almost certainly in our building.
What was the information that the FBI had? What did they show you?
The information that our colleagues shared with us remains classified to this day because it would reveal some of our methods that the Cubans aren't yet aware of.
Some of the methods and systems that the DIA employs to collect information about other countries' activities are so sophisticated, and that's why espionage is so dangerous. Because if you tell other countries, hey, the United States is able to do this, they will then guard against that. And of course that degrades our ability to collect the information that our warfighters need in the event that they go to war with some country. That's the problem. For most of the years that I worked for DIA, I was the senior counterintelligence investigator. So if anybody was engaging in espionage in the agency on my watch, that was an affront to me. I hate that. I think it's the betrayal that gets me. Like, how dare you? One investigative lead that the FBI had was that the spy in question had traveled to the naval station at Guantanamo, Cuba, during a specific time frame. That was the best investigative lead. I knew that people who travel to Gitmo require permission to do so, and they submit their request for permission by message. And it's searchable by keyword. It only took me moments to submit my query. And the system produced a hit file, a list of messages, about 100 of them, that matched the parameters of my search. And so I started hitting my function key very quickly, just to see if I would recognize names. And the 20th one, it was, I don't want this on, it was very, very emotional. The moment I saw her name, I knew. That second I saw her name, Belén Montes, I said, oh shit. Because I knew that Ana at that time was the Queen of Cuba. She was the senior Cuba analyst in the entire U.S. intelligence community. Belén Montes had probably more time invested in the study of political and military affairs regarding Cuba than anybody else. Ana's security clearance was top secret with access to special intelligence. This stuff is so extraordinarily sensitive that only a handful of people would be given access to it. Someone in Ana's position could cause exceptionally grave damage to our collective security, and she could do that in a moment, which means a greater possibility that our warfighters, who are our boys and girls, will die. That's why this is not a game. I actually went into shock. And at that moment, I realized I'm the only guy outside of Havana who knew that Ana Montes was a major spy. Now, this was not the first time that I had seen Ana Montes' name. I had other interactions with Ana, and during the course of those interactions with her, I developed a gut feeling that there was something wrong and suspicious about this woman. And so when I saw her name again, I knew that she was the spy that they were looking for. 4 years earlier, in April 1996, one of our employees, Reg Brown, came to me expressing concerns about Ana. He said, her actions during a specific incident caused me great concern.
Give me a 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been briefed by the National Security Advisor on the shooting down today of 2 American civilian airplanes by Cuban military aircraft.
On the 24th of February, 1996, the Cuban military shot down 2 aircraft operated by a Cuban emigre group. It's called Brothers to the Rescue. 2 civilian aircraft piloted by a total of 3 American citizens were shot down in international airspace by Cuban MiGs.
Do you have relatives?
Yes, my son, our son,
was in one of the airplanes.
That was the murder of 3 American citizens. Now, in response to the shoot down, the United States government scrambled to figure out what had happened and how we might respond. One of the first people that the Pentagon called in as an expert to advise them was Ana Montes. In that circumstance, when the Pentagon calls you in, you must stay in place until you are dismissed. It doesn't matter how long. If you're in there for 2 months, you stay there until our senior military leaders no longer have a need for your expertise. Reg Brown called the Pentagon shortly after 8 p.m. that night just to ask Ana a question, but she left. And he thought, well, that's odd. Reg thought that her actions in leaving the Pentagon early was suspicious. So the first thing I did is I took a look at our own records. Everybody at DI has a personnel file. Everybody has a security file. I reviewed our files on Ana Montes, and what I found was an absolutely model employee. Ana, she had been working at DIA since 1985, and she'd never committed a security violation. She rose through the ranks very quickly, lived very modestly. She was the kind of employee that supervisors hold up for others to emulate. So the assessment that Ana might be a spy just didn't make a lot of sense. Nevertheless, I decided to interview her, and Ana gave me great answers to most of my questions. But then when I started questioning her about just going home, and did anybody see you, her entire demeanor changed. One minute, we're joking and laughing and having a good time, and the next minute, she is scared to death that I know something that she did. And I had no idea what it was. I didn't know what was going on. But I walked away from that situation with a gut feeling that she was hiding something from me that was very important to her. And that gut feeling played a major role 4 years later, in September of 2000, when her name popped up on that screen. And so I contacted the FBI. I met with them. I told them, look, I've got an employee who I think is your suspect. The FBI had yet additional data that they were employing to measure suspects, new information which I had not previously possessed. And I refer to it as a template. Ana Montes did not match up against that template at all. The FBI told me that, well, on the basis of this information alone, I can eliminate your employee as a suspect in this case. And they obviously had a lot of confidence in the validity of this new information. They used it as a trump card on me. From the time I left the meeting until the time I took the elevator ride downstairs and I found myself literally out on the curb, I knew that Anna was at work 3 miles south in our headquarters building. I could just picture her in my mind's eye, because that woman was in my building, pulling this crap on my watch, placing our entire nation's future at risk. She was going to get the hell out of there. Now, I needed the FBI to be able to make that happen. So what I did, I said, we are going to persuade the FBI that Ana Montes was the spy that they were looking for. And I realized that I had to attack the trump card. The next morning, on a Saturday, the 14th of October of 2000, I got up. I couldn't sleep very well. I was so upset about the trump card because what I knew about Anna did not match up against that new information at all. But I knew that she was the agent they were looking for. It was her. I never doubted my intuition. The next day, I spent most of the day examining their trump card, and I discovered something. I discovered a pattern that I recognized from something that I learned in an 8th grade statistics math class. And my math instructor told us, if you ever see this pattern, you need to understand that the fix is in. Somebody is manipulating the data in order to get the outcome that you're looking at. And I saw a pattern which I knew could never occur in a random world. Can't happen. It had to be the Cubans. The FBI was using a trump card that was being manipulated. They didn't know it. And so at that moment, I realized that I had cracked the trump card. I wrote up an 8-page memo, and the next morning, I faxed that 8-page memo over to the FBI. About an hour later, the FBI case agent, Steve McCoy, called me. And the first thing he said was, Scott, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I think we're going to be working together for a while. And I was relieved. The only way we were going to be successful is to work together. And it was at that moment I knew that we were going to be okay. One of the things that the FBI did was to assign a co-case agent by the name of Pete Lapp.
So the first time I heard the name Ana Montes was at our squad Christmas party in 2000. I knew the FBI had gotten a name of suspect, someone who may have matched one of these unsubbed cases, as we call them. So I talked to Steve McCoy, the senior case agent, and I said, hey, I hear you're working this neat case and you have a name. You know, I'd love to work with you on this. So he said, yeah, sure, I'd really appreciate your help. And from there, we worked the entire case together with Scott. It's important to keep in mind that the FBI has to prove these cases. You know, we're the lead counterintelligence agency for the United States. The Bureau is going to be the organization that brings charges against someone for espionage. So there's a lot of pressure on us to get it right. Knowing someone is guilty of espionage is fundamentally different than proving that someone's guilty of espionage. So let's validate Scott's claim that she's an agent of a foreign power, and in fact, who we're looking for. And then let's try or catch her in the act of committing espionage. National security letters are hugely important tools for the FBI. So a national security letter is a letter that's issued by the FBI that compels financial institutions, credit institutions, telephone companies to relinquish critical information. And once Montes is identified as a suspect, we opened a full investigation on her. It allowed us the opportunity to use national security letters. We had very sensitive intelligence that told us that the unknown subject had purchased a specific brand, make, and model computer at a specific period of time in 1996 from a store in Alexandria. No further information. Through national security letters, I identified Anna's line of credit. And from that, we knew that Anna had made a purchase to CompUSA back in October of 1996. So in April 2001, we served a national security letter at CompUSA and asked them, could we identify a specific purchase made here in October of 1996? And they said, we keep records that far back behind the store, and we only keep them for about 5 years. This was April of 2001. The records were almost destroyed. So we pulled out boxes, and about 20 minutes after we started, the assistant manager for CompUSA said, is this what you're looking for? And in fact, it was the purchase that Anna made in true name for the computer that we could prove that the Cubans tasked her to purchase back in October of 1996. This sales receipt for this computer purchase proved that she was in fact the spy. So from April of 2001, I had no doubts that she was a Cuban spy. The question was she currently spying, and could we catch her in the act of committing espionage? This sales receipt for this computer purchase proved that she was in fact the spy. Ana Montes officially became the prime suspect of the unknown subject investigation. Now it's just a matter of proving her, catching her in the act of committing espionage.
We need to get around film meeting someone. Uploading intelligence secrets, passing an encrypted thumb drive, that's the ultimate threshold. Court-worthy evidence that will convict a spy.
So one of the first things we did was request physical surveillance resources on her.
We had a lot to do. You know, the FBI put cameras in her cubicle and microphones and tapper phones and all that sort of thing.
We started doing significant physical surveillance on Montes, identifying her patterns of behavior, what was her routine.
So in watching Ana Montes, we saw that, for example, she would leave her home on Sundays at a precise time, go to the local metro, get on, go several stops, get off, walk, stop at locations, wait 60 seconds, go somewhere else, wait 90 seconds. Very methodical, things that a normal person doesn't. So from a tradecraft standpoint, you knew something was afoot. When her shoe seemingly came untied and she stopped and tied it, was she really tying her shoe? Or was she doing counter surveillance or signaling someone? Over the next several months, the surveillance team told us, we've got a pattern now. She's leaving work at particular times. She's following a route. Here's the route. She's going into drugstores. But she doesn't come out with a bag, so what's she doing in the stores? Turns out she was using the payphones.
Not too long ago, we had payphones everywhere, and using payphones was not in and of itself suspicious, but when you have a cell phone, when you have a home phone, and when you have phones at your office, the fact that you go a couple blocks off your normal route to and from home to use a payphone, that is suspicious.
Once we did the legal paperwork to get the records from the payphone, we saw that she was calling pagers in New York City, and those particular numbers we knew were associated with Cuban espionage. And our suspicions were that she was punching in codes, 3 or 4 digits. So we knew she was communicating with a pager. She was sending signals that told us she was still active.
So we saw her making all these payphone calls, the timing of which corresponded with encrypted high-frequency messages being transmitted to the D.C. area from Cuba. Even before Montes was identified as a suspect, we knew that the Cubans were communicating to their agents via high-frequency messages that would have been picked up using a shortwave radio. The Cubans would send a message on a Tuesday, repeated again twice on Thursday, twice on Saturday. We knew that communicating to the Cubans via the high-frequency messages required encryption and decryption disks. So it's not like they were sending the messages out in the open air. They were encrypted messages that no one else could read unless you had the matching decryption software that the Cubans gave to their agents. In order to catch her in the act, we knew we needed to get into her home because we knew we were trying to find these disks. She lived in a 30-tenant ownership building, so a huge challenge for us to try and get into her apartment without getting detected. Our surveillance of her taught us that she had a boyfriend, and her boyfriend lived out of town in Florida. And her traveling to visit her boyfriend Memorial Day weekend of 2001 gave us a long opportunity to get into her apartment covertly, to do a physical search. So when we went into her apartment, I was absolutely nervous. It was hot, there was no air conditioning, and although it was a small two-bedroom apartment, there was a lot to look through. You know, the risk of getting caught doing this is tremendous, and that's the last thing you want to do is compromise the investigation by someone coming home too early, or someone, you know, watering the plants when you didn't plan on them doing that. We started searching her apartment, and first thing we found was the Sony shortwave radio in its box, out in the open, underneath an open window. And then we found the Toshiba laptop computer that the Cubans had tasked her to purchase. So our computer experts made a copy of the computer, a hard drive, so that we could forensically analyze it and see what was on it. So Ana Montes, you know, as she had received and sent reports out to the Cubans, had tried to delete what was on her computer, but in the deleted space of her computer, we found almost 11 pages of single-spaced text in English and Spanish, and in that text, we found national defense information that Montes gave to the Cubans that was classified. That was a hugely successful covert search, but we had not found the disks. If we could find the disks that the Cubans had given her, we'd be able to read her encrypted messages while she was getting them, and hopefully then know what the messages were between her and the Cubans. We had made a copy and found the communication between her and the Cubans on the computer. We found the shortwave radio. We saw her making all these payphone calls. And we knew we had a strong case, but we felt that we had to find these disks. We really needed that concrete proof that took away any shadow of doubt from anybody that Montes is guilty of espionage.
The FBI speculated that perhaps she was keeping this data on her person. And the reason they couldn't find it is because she was carrying it around with her all the time, perhaps in her purse. The objective was to get to her purse, search it, and get that purse back without either Ana or any of her coworkers having even a suspicion that something unusual had occurred.
So we came up with a plan to separate her from the purse. We had insider access to Ana Montes' daily life. So what occurred to us is we could create a fake meeting that she would have to attend.
We gave her a major speaking assignment, which meant that she would be visible to everybody. And psychologically, it just wouldn't look good for her to have a purse sitting on top of her materials. So we scheduled that briefing for 9 o'clock in the morning because we wanted to make sure that Ana had had time to settle in at work by 8 o'clock to put her purse into a drawer so she would just secure it. And she did.
All the attendees were at the meeting, prepared to do a good hour and a half discussion of this very important issue. Once the door was closed, the FBI technical team, under the guise of being a maintenance crew, went into her cubicle in the surrounding area to do routine maintenance on the facilities and had access to her purse.
So while she was at the meeting, we had a very short period of time to go through her purse, looking for the discs. It was a typical woman's purse, had cosmetics and wallets and just had a lot of purse-type stuff in there. So we looked and searched in and couldn't find the discs there.
So we couldn't find exactly what we were looking for, but we did find something. Inside Anna's purse, the FBI found a sheet with a matrix, which was crypto material which Anna employed when she communicated with the Cubans via pagers. And that was exactly what we were looking for, to determine what the message was between her and Cuban intelligence.
Once we had her brevity codes, it was simply a matter of going to a phone, punching in the exact same codes, and then we'd just match it against the messages that had been sent and would be sent in the future and know exactly what she was telling New York. It told us at the time that she did not perceive herself in danger, and it was setting up the future meetings to meet with her case officer or spy handler, which was every second week. If we could get her meeting with a spy handler, we know we would get her convicted and put her in prison. She had the potential to be one of America's most dangerous spies.
I was sitting in my boss's office, I think, in a commercial office building in Northern Virginia, about a mile up from the Pentagon, when 9/11 occurred. And we riveted to the television screen. We understood that this was a terrorist attack and that it was significant. I sat in there for another 20 minutes or so, and I saw a puff of smoke to my right. And the puff of smoke persisted, and it turned gray and began to billow. And then the news coverage came on about the aircraft hitting the Pentagon. I didn't see the impact, but I knew what was happening. We had just crossed a threshold, and that the United States of America was going to formulate some sort of a response that would require the assistance and support of the Defense Intelligence Agency.
In the aftermath of 9/11, DIA assembled a task force to support the Pentagon's forthcoming operations in Afghanistan. Anna Montes was among those to be chosen for the task force.
On Saturday, the 22nd of September, Anna was going to be briefed on the war plan for Operation Enduring Freedom, the effort to remove the Taliban from Afghanistan. If Anna Montes gained access to information about our war plans, she could give it to the Cubans, who in turn would be happy to trade that information or to simply share that information with our adversaries, possibly including the Taliban. In that event, all of our plans that we executed during Operation Enduring Freedom would have been known to the enemy. I knew that our investigation with Anna was coming to an end.
We really wanted to catch her in the act of committing espionage with her handler, who was handling and receiving the classified information. But we knew that it was just too much risk and potential damage to keep her at DIA at such a sensitive time when we were launching a war. It was time to arrest Montes for a conspiracy to commit espionage.
When 9/11 happened, we knew we had days left in the investigation.
We really wanted to catch her in the act of committing espionage, but it was just too much risk to keep her at DIA at such a sensitive time when we were launching a war. It was time to arrest Montes for a conspiracy to commit espionage.
The FBI decided they'd like to effect the arrest over in our building. We decided to bring her down into the offices of the Inspector General.
So we were going to arrest her at work, but we still wanted to try and get her to make some incriminating statements. If we could get her to say things about her espionage in an interview before she's arrested, That'd be a good thing for the prosecution. We started our interview, talked to her about the scenario that wasn't true, that there was a defector that came out from the Cuban Intelligence Service, and he talked about a penetration of the U.S. government. And quickly into this pretext, Anna had this interesting physiological reaction. And it was this rash that immediately broke out, and they were on the side of her neck that was facing me. I could only see them. You know, I had to kind of control myself and not go, look at that, she has this rash breaking out. So she got him under control, and she was very focused and very firm. Getting through this story, Montes kind of wised up to it and asked if she was under investigation. And at that point in time, we told her she was under arrest for conspiracy to commit espionage, handcuffed her, and her life changed from that moment on.
Pete came out of the conference room with Anna. She was in handcuffs, and I saw them walking down the corridor, if you will, towards me. She was almost standing in front of me, and she never looked at me. I doubt that she had any real idea as to what role I might have played in her capture.
We're pleased to announce this morning that 45-year-old Anna Belén Montes pled guilty to a one-count indictment charging her with conspiracy to commit espionage. Today's guilty plea is a result of a plea agreement between Ms. Montes and the United States that will require Ms. Montes to fully cooperate with law enforcement by providing information relating to all criminal and/or intelligence activities of which she has knowledge.
As part of the plea agreement, she got 25 years for espionage, and in exchange for that, she agreed to be fully debriefed by the FBI and the rest of the intelligence community. She was debriefed for about 7 months, exhaustively, probably 3 times a week, 5 or 6 hours a day.
During Anna's debriefing, they took her from the earliest days in 1985 when she started, all the way up to the day of arrest.
What did you learn?
We learned she betrayed us in El Salvador, compromised all of our military operations in Central America throughout 5 years of the secret war during the 1980s. And think, here was a woman that would literally sit across the table from special forces teams going downrange and pretend to be their friend, and then as soon as the meeting is over, contact her Cuban handlers and say, you have another special forces team going on to El Salvador. They'll be at this location on these dates. Good luck. Happy hunting. I'm convinced she willfully and intentionally took every action she could to get Americans killed in combat. It should make us all enraged.
People from the intelligence community, every individual that she met from the U.S. government, if they were going to Cuba covertly, she identified who they were and what their true mission was versus what their stated mission was.
A lot of the information she shared will remain classified to the American public. And isn't that ironic that information that you cannot read was read in Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, Cuba? There's no way, even in 6 months of daily, all-day interrogations, you're not going to get everything that a career spy did in 16 years. We will never fully know the damage that she did to the United States. During the time we were debriefing her, we learned a lot about her motivation for being the Cuban spy.
So in 1984, 1985, Montes was working on her master's degree in international relations at Johns Hopkins University. And her mutual friend saw her in class, knew her opinions, knew that she was diametrically opposed to U.S. foreign policy and what we were doing in that time period, which was 1984, 1985. Anna felt that the United States didn't have a right to kind of impose their will on other countries, especially in Central and South America, and really disagreed with U.S. foreign policy at the time. So her friend sensed that she had this passion that the Cubans would be interested in. She's introduced to the Cubans via a diplomat who was there undercover. He recognized that she had this visceral empathy for the Cuban plight, for the Cuban cause, and that's folks who they really reach out to and ultimately trust to be their agents.
Honest Cubicle was actually devoid of anything personal. It was all devoted to business. But on Honest Cubicle wall, posted right next to her computer monitor, was a piece of paper. It was lined and written in script. The king hath note of all that they intend, by interceptions which they dream not of. Fidel Castro was aware of all of their plans, by some secret means they can't even imagine. This was an inspirational quote that she had posted to her wall so that every time that she was down at her computer, she could see it and motivate herself as a spy. You know, people who commit espionage are placing our collective security at risk. Our boys and girls in uniform who are fighting battles for us are going to die because somebody stabbed them in the back. That's what espionage is, death. And that's why guys like me work so hard to find these people. I've told people that hunting for spies is like trying to find a ghost in the fog. And you've got to believe, first of all, that they're there. And then you have to have enough drive to keep looking.